Hello and welcome to another edition of Wine Talk Wednesday. I'm your host, Clay Wheeler. I'm a certified sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers. Today we're going to talk about RAEN. RAEN is a producer in Sonoma Coast, but more specifically the western Sonoma Coast. So true Sonoma Coast right there on the border right there with the Pacific Ocean. RAEN stands for Research in Agriculture and Enology Naturally, which kind of plays to what they do because they are minimal interventionalists. So they do as little as they possibly can. As far as influence of the wines, they try to do little in the vineyards, no pesticides, try and do integrated pest management. They pick at night, which is nice. It's kind of an interesting thing. We'll talk about that more as we go. They really care about the vineyard sites and want to make sure that they last and stand the test of time, but are also cognizant of what they do in the vineyard site to make sure that it's not hurting the environment, to make sure that it's not hurting the community and things of that nature. So they're doing really great things over there at RAEN. RAEN was started by Carlo and Dante Mondavi in 2013. Now, you've probably heard that name once or twice before in the wine world, especially in Napa Valley. Their father is Tim Mondavi, and then their grandfather, of course, is Robert Mondavi. A little quick history if you don't know or you're not super familiar with that. So Robert Mondavi started the first new winery to open up in Napa Valley since Prohibition. So he started that in 1966, and Prohibition ended in 1933. So we're looking at 33 years before a new winery opened up in Napa Valley, and Robert was the first. Now, during that entire time, Tim Mondavi, who's Robert's son, was very influential and worked with both Robert Mondavi and with Opus One, because Robert's full view and focus was to make the best wines in the world. And in order for him to make the best wines in the world, he had to go to the best wines in the world. He was known for going to France and going to other places with a case of Robert Mondavi wine in hand, per se, and showing them what he makes, and then seeing what they're making to specifically like the Baron Philippe Rothschild, who he partnered with in Opus One to make that wine. So Baron Philippe Rothschild with Mouton Rothschild, with Lafite, Latour, a lot of those different wineries, but more specifically the Mouton Rothschild for the Baron. So they started in 1996. They started Opus One. Carlo and Dante started in 1996 with Opus One and with Robert Mondavi, working there for a little while, as long as they possibly could throughout the entire time right there. And then in 2004, the Mondavi family sold off the name. So the name was sold off, and then Robert and Tim and Marcia, they went and looked for new lands, they looked for a new place, and started a new winery, which in 2005 opened up, and that was Continuum, which is a fantastic wine. It's a Cabernet Franc-based wine, which I think is very interesting, especially for where it is and what it does. But they opened it up, and I'm sure Carlo and Dante followed with them in there in 2005. Then in 2013, Carlo and Dante started RAEN. Now, what's kind of neat is it's kind of twofold. So RAEN stands for that anagram of Research in Agriculture and Enology Naturally, but they also wanted it to be pronounced and sound like rain, like what you would get whenever it rains outside, because we have to remember that the grape juice and the wine that we have right now started as rain. So that's kind of an interesting thing for them. So this one is one of their three bottlings. This one is their Cuvée Royal St. Robert, of course, named after their grandfather. This comes to us from Sonoma Coast, but true Sonoma Coast, right there on the Pacific Ocean. You can actually see the ocean from there. It is outlooking the Bodega Bay, and you can see the full Sonoma Coast from there. It's in Freestone. Is where this one in particular is. They have a couple of other bottlings. They have two other Pinot Noir bottlings that are single vineyard sites, and then they have a Chardonnay that's also a single vineyard site. But we're going to talk about this one in particular. The nice thing about this area is it's a southeastern exposure. Now, what that means is that it gets the morning sun from the east, and gets that nice bright sunshine to come throughout the day. But then it cools off a little bit, and then cools off quite a bit at nighttime. So you have that diurnal shift, that shift from the daytime being warm to process those sugars and get some photosynthesis going, and then nighttime to preserve that acidity and keep that acidity built up. And they actually pick at night. One of the cool things about them is you can look on here. I don't know if you can see it probably that far, but on here it states the time that this vintage was picked. So it's picked at 4:30, and then it tells you the type of moon that was going at the time. So there might be a little bit of biodynamic involved in here. That I didn't read anything about biodynamic or sustainable or organic, though I'm sure they follow a lot of those practices, at least in the sustainable and the organic side. But it talks about a waxing, a crescent, and a full corn moon, which is what they put on every single one of their corks to tell you what time they picked at and the moons that were going on while they picked. So I think that's very, very cool and very interesting to show that. There's a morning fog that comes through that kind of gets everything nice and cooled down, and then in the summer, and as the day progresses, the sun comes out, the fog goes away, and then it gets that beautiful sunlight on the grapes. These are done whole cluster, but not only whole cluster. So Carlo and Dante spent a lot of time at Domaine Dujec in Burgundy to kind of look and see how he did things and how they do things. And one of the things that they do there is whole cluster. So as opposed to taking the berries off of the stems and then squeezing the juice out of those, they leave them on the stems in a whole cluster and squeeze the juice and ferment that with the cluster, with the stems on there. But they made sure to keep the really, really green stems in there too, which help with building some flavors, building some character, and really creating some nice nuances in the wine that you wouldn't normally get if you didn't have the stem inclusion. They also use native fermentation, which also is part of that with the cluster, with the whole cluster. As you hold that whole cluster, you also get the yeast that are already on the grapes, and that's what helps ferment and going. So they do 100% native yeast. So they don't put any kind of cultured yeast in there, which helps also tie it to the terroir of the area and keep it, terroir focused, keep it focused on what's growing and what's going on in the Sonoma Coast, especially in that Freestone area. They're aged in neutral French oak, so it's old French oak that doesn't impart the flavors of vanilla and those baking spices. It does provide some oxidation and provides some balancing for the wine, and then also gives it a little bit of a nutty character, gives it a little bit, maybe a little caramelization, a little bit of smoke maybe, but doesn't impart those flavors. Again, they want to show the true nature of the grape, of the Pinot Noir, of the Chardonnay, so that way they're not covering it up with a bunch of oak. And then one of the really cool things, and you really can't see it in the glass, I wish you could, feel free to purchase a bottle from us if you want to, but if you can look, it's got a little bit of a haze to it. It's not fully like crystal clean because they don't fine and don't filter. Again, same concept. With any kind of fining, any kind of filtering that you do on a wine, you're going to strip some flavors out no matter what. And some things are good to take out. Some things are bad to leave in as far as flavors and aromas that are not so, not that we want to smell. Like there's nothing bad about them. We just don't want to smell them necessarily, don't want to taste them necessarily. But they do a great job in making it unfined and unfiltered, but still having all those great flavors and aromas. And it's a low alcohol wine, which is great, especially because it's from a cool area. So the cool area is going to give it a lower alcohol wine. So it's stating on the bottle that it is 12.5. Now, this wine is absolutely delicious. You do have that little bit of caramelization. You do have that little bit of a nuttiness that I smell right off the bat. It's got these really fresh, vibrant fruits going on. It's got some aniseed, some licorice notes going on as well. Strawberry, there's some wild cherry in there. And you can smell that greenness and that kind of freshness from the stem inclusion that just kind of bring out this great depth in the wine and especially in the mouthfeel. great wine. I absolutely love it. I highly recommend it. It is on our wine list right now for $112, but you also get 20% off now, so that would come out to, I'm good at wine and not at math, so whatever $22 and some change off of 112 would be. So yeah, so definitely recommend RAEN, RAEN, Research in Agriculture and Enology Naturally, from the Western Sonoma Coast, the true Sonoma Coast. Thank you thank you so much for joining me, and be sure and like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. Be sure to continue looking at our website for more updates on what we have day in, day out. This will be going out Wednesday, the 29th. Those of you who have not signed up yet, be sure and sign up for our Gerard Bertrand tasting on the 30th, where we do a Zoom live tasting with a gentleman from France, not Gerard Bertrand, but another great person who works alongside with Gerard Bertrand, and maybe a couple other surprises that'll jump in on there from 6 to 7:30. Be sure and pick up your kits. And thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day. Cheers.